This junction box we did for Marco is actually one that I wouldn't normally recommend for most people unless we have an in-depth conversation first. And that is basically 7-cable method. 7-cable is basically when you run 2 amps in stereo, but you're using their full effects loop connections for both amps. Normally we would do 5-cable, which is using the full effects loop on 1 amp and just the effects return on the other. So you have one master preamp that affects both power amps, but this is 7-cable. We're using both preamps. We're using both power amps, all the connections. So you plug your guitar into the box, that's cable 1, you send to your dry effects, back to the junction. Then we split that signal to both amp inputs, that's cable 2 and cable 3. Both amps effects sends come back to the junction box. That is cable 4 and cable 5. I hope I'm keeping up to the numbers here. Then you send to your wet effects in stereo. Those run through your wet effects, maybe your delay, your reverb in stereo, back to the junction box. Then we go back to both amps effects returns. That's cable 6 and cable 7. 7-cable method. The big issue here is not all amp effects loops are created equal. So you want to make sure that your amp's effects loops aren't going to run into level issues. Maybe one's running at line, one's running at instrument. One is passive, one is active. You can run into all sorts of issues here. We made sure that would not be a problem for Marco. The next issue is the amps being out of phase. We need to be able to correct polarity issues between these amps, so we made sure that would be able to happen. Lastly, we need to be able to isolate one amp entirely from the other so that there are no ground loops. To make sure this would happen, we need to isolate amp 1's effects return. We need to isolate amp 2's input, effects send, and effects return. 4 transformers in total. That adds a lot of cost to something like this, as transformers are not cheap. So doing 7-cable is not an easy thing to pull off. I still don't recommend it unless we have a big conversation about all the possible issues that can come up. But all those boxes were ticked. We were able to get this going for Marco. It's a really cool box. Lastly, we added 2 TRS throughs for amp channel switching, one for amp 1, one for amp 2, and we made sure both of these were floating so we didn't add any extra noise into his rig by running channel switching alongside his audio. All of this fits into the one box. What a great box for 7-cable method lovers out there. This is possible, not easy, but comment below if you have any questions. I'd love to chat about it more. See you guys later.